Hello everyone. The topic for today is shape of data distributions. Right now I want you to pause the video so you can copy down your notes and then resume when you're ready. So the first thing that we need to understand is the idea of symmetry. If a shape is symmetrical, that's going to tell us a little bit about the data. If it's not symmetrical, that's going to tell us some other things about the data. Okay? After we find out whether or not it is symmetrical, we need to identify any clusters, identify any gaps, identify a peak, and then describe the center and the spread. So, taking a look at this box plot, remember, for a box plot, there are really only 5 numbers that you can gather. You could have 5 numbers just by themselves in the data set. You could have 100 numbers in the data set, but based on just having the box plot, you only know 5 of those numbers. So in this box plot, we know 90, we know 10, we know 20, we know 50, and we know 80. Those are the 5 numbers that we know from this box plot. Now, it's not a guarantee that all of those numbers are even a part of the data, but based on what we have to answer these questions as best as possible. So, first question, is it symmetric? That's a yes or no. In this case, it is. So, we're going to write yes. Identifying any clusters. Well, because we don't have all of the numbers, we can't really identify any clusters. So, we would say cannot identify cluster. We also cannot identify any gaps because there are no gaps in a box plot that would tell us, oh, there's a big gap between this number and another number. So again, cannot identify gaps. We also cannot identify the peaks. Yes, we can tell what the highest number is in the data set, but we don't know if that's the peak or just the highest number. So we cannot identify the peak. So in most cases, if the graph is symmetric, then we would use the mean to describe the center and the IQR or interquartile range to describe the spread. If not, we would use the median to describe the center and the IQR to describe the spread. In this case, because we don't have all of the numbers necessary, we can still use the median because usually the mean and the median are fairly close together, depending on the set of data. So in this case, we're going to use the median, and we're going to say that the data is centered around 50, because that's the median based on the box plot. And we're going to say that the spread of the data around the center is 60. And that's because Q1, which is 20, and Q3, which is 80. The IQR is Q3 minus Q1, which gives us 60. So that describes the spread. Looking at another example, we have a dot plot. Because it is a dot plot, that means that we have every single piece of data that would be included, so we know all of the numbers necessary. So that means we can answer a few more of these questions. So, first question, is the data symmetric? The answer is no. Are there any clusters? Yes, there is a cluster between 10 and 12. This cluster right here is what I'm talking about. Those numbers are all bunched together, therefore they are considered a cluster. Gaps. There's a gap between 8 and 10, There's also a gap between 12 and 15. Excuse me, not 15, 14. We don't have anything at 15, so that would not be considered the edge of the gap. The peak is at 10, because that's when the numbers, that's the highest amount of numbers. So peak and mode tend to go together, not always, but just as a word of wisdom, usually looking for the mode, that'll tell you the peak. And then to describe the center and the spread, because we have a shape that is not symmetric, we're going to use the median. So the data is centered around 11. That is the median. And the spread of the data around the center is 2, because the IQR is 2. Looking at another example, we're going to do problem number 1. Well, first question we have to answer is whether or not it is symmetric. Well, that is symmetric, so that eliminates choice A and choice B. So now let's look at whether or not there are any outliers, because both choices C and D say that's where they are different. Well, because it is a box plot, we cannot identify any outliers. We just know that the numbers are between 45 and 5. So we would say there are no outliers. Now I want you to answer question number 2. Bring that answer along with any questions that you may have with you to class tomorrow.